morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Say hi. Yes, I love the high back. I have folks on the live stream too. Today is the second day of the first annual Drag and Spiritualities Summit taking place here in Chicago. Today we're at the Broadway United Methodist Church in Lakeview. We have a really great program ahead of you today. Our first panel this morning is titled Bare Naked, Queering Our Religion and Spiritual Identities. And then our next panel at 11:15 is Spiritual Care for Drag Artists. And then we will have a small lunch break. And we're going to do like an affinity lunch. And we're going to do like some, just kind of a huddle conversation around what would spiritual care look like for the drag community. And so if you'd like to join that conversation, we've ordered a little bit of pizza, some salad and stuff. And so you're welcome to hang out and, chew on some pizza and have a conversation. That would be great. And then after that, we're going to have our embodiment panel, which is kind of interesting. We have one of the things that's been fun and challenging about this panel or this conference is that some of our participants are actually here in person either. And so our embodiment panel is actually, nobody's here except for me. So I think that's going to be really interesting. So hopefully you can stay for that or come for that if you're not here yet. And then also we have an amazing keynote this afternoon by King Lotus Boy, which is around kind of divine heal, like finding the divine after experiencing trauma. It's gonna be a really great keynote. And if you don't know King Lotus Boy, you need to find them on Instagram. They're really great. All right, I will stop with all of that and get into the good stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and invite Danny Sanchez up to welcome.
Okay, thank you, Bonnie. So my name is Danny. I am a student of religion. I am a ministry practitioner, and I am a queer person. And I am so excited to welcome you all this morning and to introduce this panel. So the panel is called Born Naked, and I'll just say a few words about that and then invite the panelists up. So you all recognize, I'm sure, the phrase Born Naked from the lyric of that RuPaul song, We're All Born Naked, and the rest is drag. And I really think there's two truths in that statement. The first truth that I hear is about our shared humanity, how underneath our clothes, we are all human, we are all flesh and bones, and there's something fundamental that we all have in common with each other. But then there's also a completely opposite truth. It's this invitation to play, to be different, to explore, to put on clothes, to put on a performance, to put on something that is more than just what the world tells you to be. That you have an infinite realm of ways to express yourself. So that's what we're gonna talk about today. It's really that tension between what we have in common, what we all share together, and how that is expressed in our traditions, in our spiritual traditions, but then also how we resist. How do we resist tradition? How do we express ourselves as individuals? And so with that, I am going to invite our panelists to all come up and have a seat with me, and we'll introduce them and get started. Okay, so first thing, I'm going to let all our panelists introduce themselves. So if you would share your name, your pronouns, and how would you describe your relationship to drag?
My name is Natalie. I use they or she pronouns. I am a Master of Divinity student at the University of Chicago. I'm also a queer, kinky relationship anarchist who is excited to be here and excited to be talking about drag not only as a artistic act, not only as something that is beautiful and fun, but as something that is political and a radical way of reimagining how we relate to ourselves and to the world.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Shams. I perform as Layla, Layla. My connection to drag is partially the beauty of it. I feel powerful and strong, and it allows me to express my femininity as a gay man, which I think is very necessary. Although every day at work, I do what's called daddy drag, where I wear overcoats and hats and look like a daddy from the 1950s, because I totally feel that masculine energy as well.
Hello everyone, my name is Kerrigan. I use they, them pronouns. I am a relatively freshly out queer person. And I have never really had the opportunity to do drag. But I've always been like interested in rituals and like the performance of everything. And as I'm like discovering my own gender, I think drag has been really helpful in like thinking about sort of how I relate to my own body.
Give no round of applause for that. That's really beautiful. Great. Thank you. My name is Carly Marks. I have developed this drag persona for about 5-ish years now since I moved to Chicago. She was born out of my distaste and dissatisfaction with the two-party system and capitalism and sort of the foundations of America and the Western world. So, I'm a recent public policy graduate from the University of Chicago as well, very interested in religion and spirituality, and sort of what you all mentioned as well, just the politics of life and the radical roots of drag.
All right, thank you everyone. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists? Okay, and so the first thing we want to do is enter into the spiritual practice of telling our spiritual autobiographies. So this is a sacred way of really telling the truth about how we connect to the divine, to transcendence, to God, and however we each of us know that to be from our different perspectives. And we have a lot of different perspectives on this panel this morning. So, Lady Carly Marks, do you want to start us off? How would you talk about the story of your spiritual life?
Yeah, I feel like for my story is probably very similar to a lot of people that look like me and come from where I come from. I was born and raised in Michigan, so very rural, classic experience for most of us, I assume. But I was raised very Catholic, lots of rituals and just deep Polish Christian practices, church every Sunday, Sunday school. But I grew very upset and angry at that as I got older and learned about my queerness and how religion is used to exploit people. So then I got a little agnostic atheist for a while, which felt sad and existential and a little pessimistic. But since COVID, I feel like there's a few life things that's happened to me. My little sister passed away when I was 21. She was 16. On top of 2016, which was Trump and fascism. So drag was like a safe space, a place for me to explore my spirituality, my deep inside myself. That's why I fell in love with art again and painting myself and all the beautiful people I met through that. And then I realized that I felt so spiritual, I felt so sacred and connected to my body and my art, and I sort of reconnected with like those Catholic roots, but in sort of how I like to describe it as like a queer mystic way. My confirmation saint when I was younger was St. Francis of Assisi, and he's just like this clown to me. Like he gave up all of his wealth and all his property, gave it away, and lived a life of rags, and nailed holes into his hands for the performance art of it all, saying he had the wounds of Christ. And I'm very inspired by like Lady Gaga and how she uses Catholicism and imagery and all that sort of symbolism and sort of reclaims it for queerness. So that's where I'm at right now with that.
Yeah, I think I have a similar story, at least with the growing up conservative. I grew up in rural Missouri, and my family moved around a whole lot. I think I'm 25 now, and I think I've moved over 20 times my whole life, which is kind of traumatic. And I think one of the things that really connected me was the church. And so I was a really big component in like the church. I've worked on the national level of my denomination, the Disciples of Christ. But I think I also have started to sort of disagree with the way that the church handles queerness, and that's always been an issue for me. But I think as I'm like coming to terms with my own self and what I need and what I want, it's harder to truly identify as Christian. And so I've been recently calling myself historically Christian, because I don't want to erase the sort of connection that I had when I was growing up, because it was very important to me. But I also found solace in Japan and Shintoism. And so, as much as I would like to identify as Shinto, there are no Shinto shrines in this area of America. And I, as a white person, don't want to sort of go into sort of a Japanese-esque space, because Shintoism to me is very Japanese, and I want to acknowledge my whiteness in that. But I still like love the rituals and love like looking at that. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Kind of a big question mark, with a lot of just like interests and things.
Thanks for sharing, Kerrigan. I think question marks, Q, queerness, that's like, I feel like the space that we are called to occupy, and the gift that we have of being able to occupy that. So thank you for sharing that, honestly. Layla?
I grew up Baptist, traditional Black boy in the inner city, Macedonian Missionary Baptist Church. I remember vividly getting baptized when I was like 4 or 5. So that's where I started. The queerness thing, actually, my mother was the first one to put me in a dress, and that was for Halloween. And I vividly remember it was like this skirt, and she put me in it, and I spun around, and it floated up, and I was like, wow, this is cool. And she was like, all right, little girl. And I was like, oh, I'm not supposed to like this. And of course, we go to the party, and everybody's like, oh, she's so cute, she's adorable, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, it's my son. And I'm like, going, and it was just like, well, I'm pretty, I'm beautiful. And I didn't know it was something that I craved, but clearly I did. So beyond that, coming to Islam, I was really developed in my early 20s and whatnot. And then, when you're in your 20s, that's probably too young to be so strung out deeply on religion. It's good to have faith and know things, but to be just so sure of everything. So it didn't work out, and I went into my whole agnostic phase too. And, studied other traditions and this and that, but it called me back, and I just had to find my place in that vacuum, if you will, because it even exists in Islam, and that's what I'm here to share, hopefully with you.
How would you, one follow-up question, how would you describe where you're at now? So you talked about this kind of the journey, and where would you say you are at now in your spirituality?
Spirituality, I definitely identify as Muslim still. I see the Quran as the perfect word of God, but the whole thing of the traditions, I really question that, because in Islam you have the Quran, and then you have these other books that are supposed to be the things that the Prophet, peace be upon him, did, and I'm like, well, you wrote all this stuff down 150 to 200 years after the prophet died, much like the New Testament of the Bible. So how can this be perfectly valid? And I think that I can find my way to the one just like anyone else.
Thank you.
I come to religion and divinity school kind of by a circuitous path in that I grew up without a lot of religion. I grew up in the Bay Area in California to queer hippies. And I went to more pagan circles growing up than Christian church services. And so moving into this space as I got older, where I started to question ideas about, well, why is religion bad and evil and all of these things that I was told both explicitly and implicitly by my family growing up. Christians were the stupid people who just couldn't think it through. It was the opiate of the masses kind of thing. Obviously, I don't think that now. But having to grapple with those ideas about why do I believe what I believe? And how can I relate to the divine spirit, the transcendent, or if you want to frame it as the divine in all of us, something that is more than we can explain, whether we call that God or something else. How can I relate to that in a way that isn't rooted in these judgments and spaces of toxicity and violence, and instead come to a space where there is room for multiplicity and room for lots of different kinds of expression or non-expression. And not just leveling those things out into, we're all the same, man, but into something that truly acknowledges and embodies the complexity of all of our different beliefs. Everyone on this panel believes something slightly different or radically different. And all of those things can be equally valid and true and distinct and unique. So I think a big part of my journey has been trying to get language to articulate that diversity and complexity. And for myself, moving through a space where not only am I acknowledging that for myself, but being able to move into spiritual care spaces and work as a chaplain and relate to all sorts of different people in my life in ways that are deep, meaningful, and truly honoring who the person that I'm with is. Being able to accompany people where they are, even if that place is very different from my own place. So that's something I continue to work on, and I don't claim I'm perfect at it yet, but I'll keep trying.
We appreciate your commitment to offering care in that way, because this is new, and I think we're all still trying to figure out how exactly to do that work. So something that we heard, I think, from every single panelist just now is that there was some point of tension between the self and your lived experience, your expression of who you are, and the tradition that you were raised in, or maybe the tradition you moved into, or a tradition that you encountered. So I'd love to hear from each of you a story of a time when you felt a tension between the tradition or the world that you claimed, that claimed you, and yourself and your expression, especially as a drag artist or as a queer person. How did you navigate that tension, and what did you learn, or maybe what are you learning?
I just talked a bunch. Should I pass the microphone?
Who's feeling really connected to that question?
I mean, what's coming to my mind right away is like, I feel like there's often this idea within whatever identity group or whatever community we're in. It's like, I'm not queer enough, or I'm too queer. I'm not Catholic enough, or I'm too Catholic. Like, there's always these two extremes of wanting to fit in and feeling judged or feeling too judged. I mean, I'm thinking about the question that you have us prep for this and sent us these questions, so I'm thinking about what I wrote down too earlier, and I don't really have any specific stories that are coming to mind, but just sort of these themes and ideas of like not fitting in, like with my drag or the way I think, the way I act in the world. Just like the ideas of gender. So Karl Marx is a play off Karl Marx, right? I used to be like a hardcore neoliberal Democrat, and now I'm a radical working class icon. But even like within that, I feel like sometimes my drag is not accepted because it's not feminine enough, or because I am such a masculine presenting cis man, sometimes I'm too masculine and too much in that sense. So there's lots of tensions, no matter where I'm at, whether it's at a club or back home in Michigan, just sort of finding that balance in life of what makes you happy, because I like what you were saying, like you're the one that has to live with yourself. I am my best friend, and I feel that sacredness, that divineness within. And I wrote a quote down when studying for this panel by Audre Lorde, who is one of my who should be one of all of our inspirations, and who's done like some really incredible deep political work in America. But self-preservation is the most radical political act, and I feel like that's sort of why we're all here today and together in this community, because we have this crave, we have this desire to relieve tension and get rid of this tension for not only ourselves but the future of the children, because we don't want them to live in that, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Lady Marks, I wanted to follow up on that because I think a lot of your art is about resistance, and in some ways you might even say that is the tension isn't something to be resolved, it's something to be lived. So can you tell us a little bit about how you maybe express resistance, how you express that tension, especially in your art?
Capitalism is weird, complex, and an illusion. It's very magical and mysterious, and it's supposed to be that way. But I feel like I see this game that they're playing. We all know the game of capitalism. We have to play it every single day, right? But I feel like by playing this game with sort of the queer things that I like to do, drag, I can sort of turn it on its head, use it against them in a way. I think about like Andy Warhol and Keith Haring and Jean-Michel Basquiat from the 80s and 90s with their pop art paintings. They're so anti-capitalist in their art, but mainstream America and people ate it up for lots of money. They thought it was, iconic and valuable. That's where I'm at right now with my art. My drag is very just like taking what they give to us, the people in power, and throwing it right back in their face and sort of mocking them with it.
Thank you. Layla?
I wanted to comment on something, and I feel like it kind of relates to your initial question. We all know about the situation in Iran with the women being forced to wear their hijab, which is one of the oldest questions that's always asked. Do Muslim women have to cover their hair? And that's not something that's found in the Quran, that's in the books outside of the text. But equally as important is Muslim men, we're supposed to grow our beard. And yet, if you went to any masjid in the world, I'm certain you would find men who don't have facial hair. Now, if you don't happen to have facial hair, you just can't grow it. But it's these things that we have that I feel like we don't live 1,700 years ago. We don't necessarily wander around in the desert anymore. So we can't always practice these mores and things. It's good to know what those traditions are and honor them. And you have to pick and choose, which we all do, what you can work in and what you can't work with. And so like for me, the homophobia I can't work with, because clearly that's who I am. And even a lot of people who live in those systems, there is like, trust me, believe me, if you ever go to the Middle East or you ever visit, I haven't, but I've watched enough films, I've read enough to know that it's there. It's this undercurrent of queerness. And every time there's an uprising like this situation in Iran with women removing their headscarves, ironically, it's also queer people involved in that. And that's always the thing, that you always get those people who are the marginalized ones, who always want to contribute to this social revolution. And I think that we have to be comfortable in being in that space that, you're going to be a rule breaker. And you have to live with that if you're going to be here in the West or in the East or anywhere. And it's fine, because you have to find the comfort within yourself. And once you get there, you can't love yourself.
We all know how that one goes. I love what you just said there. You have to be comfortable being a rule breaker. Would you say that you are comfortable being a rule breaker? How would you describe your
To
relationship?
a degree, no, I'm not gonna go as Layla to the masjid in the middle of Ramadan. That would just that wouldn't work. But, I don't wear nail polish all the time. And I guess you have the Easter Christians, those who only go for Easter Sunday service. I only go for Ramadan. I make my prayers. I can't really fast anymore because I'm diabetic. So I make it work for me. And I just want to share an interesting thing. There was maybe 3 years ago, I am never late for service when I go. It's like I was saying, regimented military, being on time. And I literally get to the masjid, the mosque, and the imam, who's one of the guest speakers, was talking about, if you need to break your fast, break your fast. And it was like, what? I'm, feeling guilty because, well, you haven't been fasting, and and it's like, wow. So there is this connection with the divine. If you're looking for the signs and you're open and you're honest, you'll see it. And that's a hard thing for us, especially as queer people, because we're always asking, am I doing this right? How do I look? How am I presenting? So it's very important for us.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think a lot about the idea of spiritual drag. And that's something that I think I identify with, even though I'm not a drag artist. I spend a lot of time pretending to be spiritually something that is very untrue to myself. I navigate a lot of spaces where, everybody just assumes I'm a nice Christian girl, and that's not, that is very far from my reality. As you might guess.
One to clarify, this is because you're a chaplain.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I work as a hospital chaplain, which means that I go into hospitals and work with people who are having a tough time. Most of the time, those people have self-identified as religious of some variety. Because this is America, most of them, when they self-identify, say, I'm some flavor of Christian. And that means very different things to very different people. But it means that I spend a lot of time talking to people with different beliefs from me. And I spend a lot of time both at school as a grad student and as a practitioner engaging with people who did not grow up in queer Bay Area hippie paganism. That's a very particular place that I come from, and it's a place that I think, especially within the queer community, and especially where the queer community and the religious community intersect, that's kind of like the mythical sacred place where you get to grow up with, two moms who love each other very much and under the redwood trees, without a lot of enforced mandatory Christianity. But for me, I find myself having to sort of navigate backwards into these spaces that are so common for so many of us, but not for me, in that I didn't grow up with enforced Christianity. I didn't grow up being afraid of who I was in the context of religion. In other contexts, sure. But religiously, that was never something that was a question. I grew up watching the San Francisco Pride Parade. There all sorts very visible in my life from a very young age. But having to now move backwards into these spaces and say, no, I am here, I am queer, and I deserve to move through these spaces where nobody can recognize that, or nobody wants to recognize that, because it's not expedient in those spaces. When I talk to somebody who's on their deathbed, they don't care that I'm here and I'm queer. They want somebody to hold their hand. And so I find myself often putting large portions of my identities into a box and finding ways to make myself smaller. And I do that sometimes by choice and sometimes by necessity. But it's something that I think about a lot. And it's something that, especially in loud, proud, queer spaces, I want to talk about more. Because I think that a lot of us do these kinds of drag to blend in and pretend or be smaller or survive. And we talk about them with shame, we talk about them with great sorrow and sadness. But I think there are also ways that we can talk about that as a kind of performance, as a kind of drag that says, yeah, this is one way that I can relate to people who don't share my beliefs, who don't understand wearing glitter and sequins and screaming from the rooftops, I am here. For all of the people who don't claim those identities or who don't claim those identities loudly and proudly, how can we continue to be with those people and make ourselves accessible to them in times of crisis and need for them? And I want to be clear that there's a distinction between doing that as an act of service or as a choice versus doing that because you're required to or because there is a threat of violence or of persecution or all of the things that we all know often come with queerness and visible queerness. But I think that navigating that and going back and forth and playing with those boundaries is something that is fascinating to me. It's something that I spend a lot of time doing, whether I like it or not. And I'm trying to find ways to be more comfortable in that fluid space.
Thank you.
I wanted to, as a chaplain, I think that's always been like one of the things that I wish. That is like a really noble profession that you're going in and helping these people in your transition to what comes. And I hope that you don't feel that you're putting yourself in a box, because there is something to be said for taking self-care, but then also to help care for another soul as it's leaving this world. That's really awesome. And wow, I'm like goosebump. That's amazing.
Carrie, do you have anything you want to add about this idea of resistance, tension?
Yes, I've kind of felt it my entire life. I haven't really acknowledged it until recently. I think along with sort of the trauma that I've had and like coming into being a queer person, I'm in this stage of my life where there are these boxes, but I don't really know what the lines look like. And I don't know how thick or thin they are. And so I'm kind of exploring where I begin and end, and sort of what my interests are and like what my faith is and all of the like boxes and everything. And so I really appreciated this idea of just queerness and queerness as sort of an all-encompassing sort of thing. So I like maybe asexual, but like, am I romantic? Am I, all these different like levels of where the box really is, like, am I these things, am I not these things? At some point, it doesn't matter. I mean, it does, but at some point it doesn't matter because I can use this box of queerness to find comfort. And identify as everything is queer. So what is my gender? Queer. What is my sexuality? Queer. What is my religion? Queer.
I love that, and I think you just summarized a essential thing that in some way all of us are saying, which is that spirituality is a form of drag. You are putting on something or performing something, and it's contextually dependent. It is an expression of different things about who you are. It comes from different communities, and it can be playful as much as it is hard. And so I want to spend a little bit of time on that playful part and turn the conversation more in that direction. Because at the end of the day, drag is a real gift. And at its best, spiritual life is a gift to you as well. And so I want to hear from you all, in what ways have you been blessed, or do you have gifts in your life from drag as an art form, from having an intentional spiritual practice? How would you describe the blessings that come out of those aspects of your life?
There's something to be said about sort of just the conversation that's happening so far right now. At least Christianity and these major religions of power and majorly historical institutions, right, that have ruled the world and collaborated with capitalism and oppressive forces. I feel like they want to beat it out of us, this idea of sacredness and spirituality. Christianity taught me to hate myself in a way, unfortunately. And as a young child, I knew that I knew it wasn't supposed to. I felt so safe and loved at church. I felt the divine. But then, you mentioned an agnostic phase as well, or sort of an atheist phase. I feel like that's sort of where they want us to go as well. Get very nihilistic and existential and have no hope left. So this idea of queerness as a religion and a spiritual force, I think that's really important and powerful. So I just wanted to acknowledge that real quick. In regards to spiritual, the gifts that I found through this, I take comfort in a lot of ritual. I love, getting in drag this morning, this little outfit, it's a little ritual for me. I do what I do and I get in it. And, I find a lot of beauty in it. I find a lot of other artists like you all, leaders and people who want to take care of each other. That's a major gift that I find. I took so many notes because I'm a little note taker, but I wrote down honoring our ancestors and fighting for our future. And then that idea again of self-empowerment, community, and that community that's based on just love and art.
I'm trying to think of something playful. The playful part, I think in performance, there's something to be said for myself being an actor and a drag performer. It's when you come on the stage, you want to try and give this, I heard Carol Channing talking about how the stage is a place for you to express the truth. It's a sacredness in the divine. It's a contract between you and the audience. And as I'm saying that right here, I'm sitting here with my false tooth in because I don't want you to see the big gap in my mouth. So I'm being honest in that. But it's the playfulness, I find that there's just that thing that anyone who is a performer, the interaction you have with your audience, hopefully, if it's a good night and you got your feelings going and people are going along with you in the song and you get that energy feedback, there's nothing like that in the world. And I guess maybe for you and I as drag performers, maybe you'll get there, maybe you'll get there. There's something in that. It feeds your soul and it becomes a drug, let's be honest. Because, looking as glamorous or as beautiful, it's addictive. So once you get that hit, you want some more. but you're not hurting anyone unless you're spending your whole check and we're not gonna go there. On your drag stuff, Amazon Prime, AliExpress, they get a lot of my money. But knowing your limits, and it is a game. I think I'm starting to realize at almost 50 now, 49, that life is a game and you're supposed to enjoy it. And anyone who tells you that you're supposed to be miserable and unhappy, whether it's in Catholicism, whether it's in Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Shintoism, whatever ism, no. Take what's good from it, and the rest, you can keep that. I got what I need here.
You asked what the gift is out of all of this, and I'm just drawing back what you said, Kerrigan. Queerness is the gift. It is the blessing out of this. I think a lot of this idea of boxes and labels is helpful, and also the practice of acknowledging where and when you can destroy those boxes, where you can step on them and crush them beneath boot heels and say, this was made by somebody else, not for me, not by me, and I do not consent to this thing. And I think that really inhabiting queer space is a political act as well as a artistic act as well as a spiritual act. I think that trying to divide these things into separate boxes is just as artificial as saying you can't wear a skirt because you're a boy. I think that trying to parse these as separate is useful for understanding them, but it can also be a limitation in that, as you were saying, Kerrigan, like all the micro labels of, am I this, am I that, am I this, am I that? Like, having the articulation and self-knowledge is powerful and affirming, and also, at the end of the day, you can get up on the stage and say, I'm queer, my gender is queer, my sexuality is queer. And I think similarly, my religion is queer, my politics is queer, is a way to move into those spaces and inhabit them and really experience their fullness. And I don't know, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Natalie, while you're talking, I was thinking about sort of embodiment and embodiment as a blessing. I think one of the micro labels that I'm considering thinking about for myself is not really a micro label, but a big label, trans. And so as I've been sort of dabbling in that identity, of course, doing research and everything, looking towards TikTok to find some good TikTokers or YouTubers or just like different things, because I've had limited access with queer communities and queer spaces. I found that sort of where I am in my body is a blessing. Even though I have dysphoria with certain things, or different types of dysphoria and everything, I still find my body to be beautiful and my body to be sort of this, it's a place that I inhabit, so I might as well like it, I might as well adore it. And so I've been trying to sort of find the sacredness in my own flesh and sort of the playfulness in that. So like tattoos and like clothing and like what, not really minding. I think because of the queer label that I've adopted, and I used to identify myself, I'm more free to not have to think about how people view me, because I do realize I have breasts that people obviously will see, and it doesn't matter if I bind them, they're too big. And so people will call me she, her, and that's not something that I can control or think about. And so I've been trying to sort of be playful in my own self and do things for myself, because that's something I haven't really been able to experience. And finally now, as a queer person, I feel like I can experience myself.
Yes, I love that. Thank you. So I have one more question, and then we're going to open up to questions from the audience. And this is specifically for the two drag artists on the panel. How can we support you? How can we support you in your flourishing, in your spirit, in your art? What would you want the audience here and the audience online to know about how they can be allies and supporters of your work?
First, real quick, in a society that profits off of hating yourself, loving yourself is the most radical act. So, like you said, we live with this body, this is our body, so this is your best friend. Make sure you love it and live in it as much as you can. But as far as support, I don't know, I'm just vibing, I'm doing my own thing, I feel good. Thanks for being here, y'all. Check out my Instagram, check out my website, ladymarks.com, Lady Carly Marks on Instagram. I always post stuff, I like to do shows here and there. And just like tip the duels when you're out and about, give them money, watch their things that they post, share their stuff. Yeah, that's my biggest piece of advice. I like to uplift a lot of other artists with myself who are doing the work that I think needs to be seen. And on that note, I would like to mention a couple of Chicago artists that I really look up to. Christopher Belmont, who was on the panel and at the show last night, they actually were the one who got me interested in this and connected me with Danny. So shout out to Christopher Belmont. Luca Me, if you haven't heard of them, they're sort of like the god, deity, father of like alternative Chicago drag. So they host really incredible, uplifting, supportive shows here. And Miss Issa Diamond, who's in the audience as well. Thank you for being so inspirational.
I would say, as a drag performer, if you have a drag diva, queen, king, clown, whatever it is, show them your love. And I mean, I know we should be talking about capitalism, but it ain't cheap, baby. It's not cheap buying the makeup, the brushes, the wigs, the hair, the shoes, whatever it is you need. So, give that child a $5. That's all I'm gonna say. A $5 helps. I did a show on the Green in New Haven for Pride, and I'm doing my thing. As I said, I'm almost 50, so I'm not out there twerking and dropping it down low and trying to scrub the floor with my wig. That's not gonna happen. I didn't do that when I was 20, and I'm not gonna do it when I was almost 50. And those little kids out front, they're just kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna go and hug them all. And then there's the other people, and just like I said, on the New Haven Green. And you're like, well, are they feeling me? Are they not getting the number or whatever? And I come off stage, and this one guy comes, oh my God, you're amazing, and blah, blah, blah. And he handed me a 20. And I was like, oh. So, I don't know if he was expecting anything else. He wasn't gonna get anything. But nevertheless, and yes, on social media, I think I have my Instagram is I am Layla the Magnificent. Yeah. Oh, stop. No, stop. No, stop. So yeah, support your queens and your performers. As someone said yesterday, and it hit something in us. It's like we are the priests and priestesses of our community. It's like, and I was like, wow, it's so true, because we're ministering to people. And you never know that song of heartbreak that somebody performs, or that new Beyonce jam, or insert diva name here that I'm too old to know about. It's like that speaks to us. And you don't know, there could just be one line in that one song that gets somebody. And so it's the circle of life. It's, it's what you did, and all that other stuff. And am I my brother's keeper? How dare you ask your creator that? Of course you are your brother's keeper. Cain.
All right, friends, so we have the microphone here. If you have a question you want to ask the panelists, if you want to just come up here and just let us know your name. Who are you? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Who is your question to and what's your question? Don't be shy. Hi.
How are you?
Hi.
This is really lovely. Thank you guys for doing this and talking about your experience. It's lovely to hear. I'm Lisa Diamond. My question is for anybody who really feels passionate about it. Considering there's so much strong emotions when there's the topic of spirituality within queer spaces, what do you do when you face resistance amongst your peers, and how do you kind of disarm that energy? Thank you.
That's what I do.
Spirituality, I think that's the trap, is we have fallen for the monolith that says that we are not part of everyone else. We've fallen for that trap. And all you can do is live your truth. And it doesn't have I saw this meme, and it was a little fish in a bowl, and the bowl is in water, and the bowl is religion. And then there's a fish swimming around in the water, and that's spirituality. And we all need that water. They just don't recognize that the energy is there. And all you can do is share your energy with them. And we can't force this. We can't force it on us. And some of us, sadly, are in that space where we think we're Cain, where we're just, have the mark of Cain on us, and there's nothing that we can do, so we just want to go frolic in the night. And sooner or later, that will catch up with us, that you'll realize, wait a minute, I'm the only one that I have here, and I have to take care of myself. Doesn't mean you have to neglect other people, but you do have to take care of yourself. And self-care, loving yourself, is a form of spirituality.
I'll take that question too. A lot of it is just saying the truth about what it does for me. Because I have a connection with God, I know that I am part of something bigger. Because I have the teachings of Jesus Christ, who said to love God and to love your neighbor, I know how to be the kind of person that I feel called to be every day. So it's really I understand that a lot of us as queer people have been excluded and pushed out of spiritual spaces, and I'm taking it back because it fills my heart.
I think for me, spiritual space is mainly people. And so I've been trying to cultivate relationships with people that I find I can be my authentic self with, where I don't necessarily have to use I don't have to use the queer label, I can use a micro label, or I can at least talk on a deeper level with. And it's hard to find those people, and so when I do, I've really clung on to them. And so I think that would be my advice for spiritual nurture.
Thank you. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I walk into a lot of queer spaces and go, I'm in divinity school, I'm sorry. And as I've been doing that for the last 4 years, getting to actually have conversations with people. I go, I'm so sorry, and then someone goes, why? Why are you sorry? Let's talk about this. People want to talk about religion. People want to talk about spirit and about transcendence. Even if they don't like Christian language, that doesn't mean they don't experience something bigger than individual being under capitalism. Everybody has a story, and making space to listen to that story is so hard and so important. I think that's my big piece of advice, is just listen and listen with very big open ears, because sometimes people will tell you things not in their direct response to the question. I'll go, I'm sorry, and they go, it's okay. And that tells me something about where they came from and about how they relate to that. And that is as informative as somebody saying, I'm carrying trauma, or I have been hurt by this thing and I don't want you to be hurt how I've been hurt. Just listen, and listen for the things you don't expect to hear, because they catch you off guard all the time, or at least they catch me off guard all the time. And it's a really beautiful thing to start paying attention to.
I just want to add one thing. St. Francis, he said, preach the gospel even to animals. So I think that that's like, you preach the gospel by living that life. And you know, if I'm, as a Muslim, saying preaching the gospel, the good news, it's about living that life. Know that not the Kardashian, Yayo, whatever life. It's about living that deeper life that we are all called to.
I love that, yeah. There's maybe another St. Francis quote that's preach the gospel, use words when necessary, right? So it's like, use your actions too. You don't have to talk about it. Any other questions from the, oh, perfect, come on up.
Cool. Hi, my name is Chris. Just really simple question, maybe something more fun, because we've been talking about saints and we've been talking about lots of really important people in queer history in the last few minutes. But I'm curious if there are any individuals that you think you would nominate using Catholic like parlance, who you would nominate to be like a queer spiritual saint. Who should be individuals that should be part of this kind of like queer spirituality canon? Like I would say like James Baldwin probably, Divine, like any individuals. I'm curious who you would nominate for that kind of role.
That's such a fun question.
I was gonna say Baldwin, so thanks for stealing that. That's my preference, which is why.
Do you want to talk a little bit about why?
Like, I say this knowing that I need to read more James Baldwin. But living a deeply queer, unapologetically, loudly queer life in spaces that still don't often know what to do with James Baldwin. I think that we need more of that in this world, and we need to uplift his fire and spirit and love in ways that we do, but not enough.
Yes, definitely Baldwin. The Fire Next Time, Giovanni's Room, you know, those things. And I had actually said this to a friend of mine who's Muslim a few years ago. And it's not, there are saints too, they're called wali. Maybe not so much in the Sunni tradition, but people who are thought of as exceptionally holy. And I had expressed that to her once, and she kind of looked at me and she said, well, you know, you have to change some things, and I don't know if it was whatever. But I think that all of us should be aspiring to sainthood.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, like literally, if, you know, we're here in this Christian space, you know, the saints of God. And that's what we should all be aspiring to. But that's hard, you know, when it's, you know, you're talking about loving people who you don't want to get along with, just want to pump them in their head sometimes that they just don't get it. But if we're all on this journey, I think that we should all be aspiring to that. It's hard. It's not easy. It's not easy. And yeah.
It's okay if you don't have any. I have a contemporary nominee, Lady Gaga, who's already come up today. But you know, I really think she's yes, been this boldly queer Catholic person and in a mainstream way, right? In a really accessible way where people can understand it. And I love that.
I just wanted to jump back 1 second and say that it's not necessarily about achieving sainthood, right?
No.
Like Lady Gaga is a great example of someone that has done all of these really loud, bright, accessible things, and has also garnered a fair amount of vitriol and sometimes justified questions about like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Stop doing that. And I think that that's a good microcosm for all of us in this idea of aspiring towards being our own saints and being saints for all of those around us. We aren't going to do it. We aren't going to succeed. And that's okay. We don't need to hit the big bullseye in the middle of the target to have the thing be worth trying. It's the orientation and aiming towards that kind of goodness, even if it's hard, even especially when it's hard, and especially when we fail, to keep aiming towards that thing. Because I think that that's the direction of growth and care for each other.
I do have someone from my, the disciples tradition, Santa Jaw.
Yes.
Also great people that who they are, this is great. They've written a bunch of books that I of course all own and have signed about like ancestors and things like this, and I think it's really good to have sort of, if queerness is a religion, what does that mean? And sort of the adoption of different faiths and different traditions, rituals, and ideas into sort of how can we make this queer, or how is it queer already? And on that note, I think that we can aspire to be saints, but I think we should also think about what saints we already hold. Who is, it's the question, like who is this, who are the people that you think about when you think about the word queer? And also I love what Lady Marks was doing with talking about queer artists and she looks for and sort of lifting up as many people that you hold dear as you can.
I know we gotta wrap it up quickly, but I'll just mention a few that have inspired me throughout the years. Gaga, Warhol, Basquiat, Frida Kahlo, a lot of artists, activists, drag queens, and performers from history. Stonewall Riots, Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson, Baldwin, Nina Simone, just the icons, the legends that keep me going and inspire me every day. Always studying, always learning from our ancestors.
Yes, thank you. And we will be the ancestors also.
Politicize Carly Marx's death someday, please. Use me for the revolution.
Thank you everyone for listening to us. Thank you to the panelists for having this conversation. Can we do one more round of applause? Thanks again for coming in. Bobby, are you gonna?
Sure. I mean, basically, we have a 15-minute break before the next panel, so like use the restrooms, water. You're not. Use the restrooms. There's some water if you need coffee. And we'll get started in about 15 minutes with spiritual care for drag artists.
All right,
Thank you.
You're in broadcast. Yeah, at the top right.
All right, so